All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's office hours, leveling up your transaction to close processes. Today, I'm thrilled to have Kendra back on and going through this process. She has a lot of talent there, being able to guide and direct you guys in a lot of different ways for your workflows in your day-to-day process. And the transaction to close one is so important. So much time and effort is spent by you, the agents, in this period of time that is critical, and making sure that things get done at the right time, because if they don't, you don't get paid, and we all want to get paid. So um, going over this as a deeper dive in some of the things that you should really do for your transaction to close process. So for those that don't know me, my name is Mark Stepp. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Realvolve. And today, like I said, Kendra is with us. Kendra, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Kendra Rouse. I'm in our premium services department. We work one-on-one with you to make sure that your systems are optimized and that you're set up for success inside of Realvolve. I'm a licensed agent. I have been for going on 10 years. I've got a background. I have an MBA in business management. So I kind of eat, breathe, and sleep business processes just naturally. And so being introduced into the world of real estate just kind of found my niche in the fact that, those two things really do go hand in hand. And sometimes you have systems, but they're not in an organized way. So I really just spend a lot of time making things systematized and easier for you, because you're doing these things anyway. They might as well be in a way that makes your life a little bit easier.
Absolutely. If you do anything more than once, you need to systematize it. You need to make it into something that is repeatable, duplicatable, and gives you the ability to scale your business.
And so today we're going to talk about leveling up your transaction and close processes. And so the leveling up behind that is you have transaction and close processes, regardless of if you're doing, 2 deals a year or 200 deals a year. You have transaction and close processes. There are things that have to be done in order. If you put anybody under contract, there's things that you have to do. But I'm sure that, any of us have seen when we go and, go under contract and you're dealing with the other side of the transaction and they just really have their stuff together. It's apparent. And, some people stand out above others and they're not just doing the minimum. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is the basics. And we're going to talk about structuring, systematizing, what that looks like in Realvolve, things like that. I have a transaction management worksheet for you guys we're going to go over. Mark, if you wouldn't mind taking a copy of that and putting it in chat. So if everybody can, if you want to open that up, and then you can click file and make a copy, and then that's your copy to kind of, as we work through this, we'll go over it and kind of, I'll show you my intent or my suggestions on that. Also want to point you back to our Realvolve Facebook page for previous recordings of the office hours. Previous weeks, you would do this every Wednesday at 11 Eastern. So, last week we had building a team in Realvolve, automation, and there's a variety of topics. We do a Q&A once a month. And so take a look at facebook.com/groups/Realvolve, and all of those videos are posted there. They're also under the Realvolve YouTube channel. There is a folder specifically for office hours where you can find those there as well.
And I did make a link. It already is made copyable. So as soon as you click on the link, it'll ask you to make a copy and you're ready to go.
Okay, perfect. All right. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, where do I start, stop being reactive and start being proactive. So if you do not have systems and processes in place, you inevitably are going to be reactive. Okay. So, let's say you go under contract and you're hoping the other side has already sent the things to title or the attorney, or you're just looking for an email, or you're doing things based off of what is coming into your space. And it's not only inefficient, it's exhausting. And so, if you have the right planning and structure in place, you can anticipate those things, so that you're spending the time on the right things at the right time. And we're going to take that a step further and really take into account the things what you should be doing versus your team, or even building a team in the future. Like, what does that look like? Planning, again, that worksheet goes into that. Building activities in Realvolve, integrating your team members and admin, and we're going to talk about completing that worksheet. So let's go live. Let's take a look at that worksheet first. All right, so specifically with transaction to close, I would encourage you to make a list of things that you have to be doing and that you would like to be doing. You may already have this built out in Realvolve, but this is, a higher level. These are the things I want to be doing, both buy and sell side. Okay. So let's take a look at this. Update your CRM brokerage compliance website. Whatever it is, okay? Even if you're a broker, or if you have a brokerage, they may require that you go into SkySlope and record those documents there. They may require a printed file still. I really hope not, but we're still doing it in 2023. That those documents for compliance purposes legally have to live somewhere, okay? So let's take that into account. When you go under contract, those documents need to go where they need to go. And so this must here, does this have to be done? Okay, so let's go through your entire transaction to close process, make a list. I've started this list for you. You can add on to it, you can change it, you can do whatever you want to it. But really the goal here is, do I have to do this? Because the things that you have to be doing need to be addressed as priority, and to make sure that they're covered. Sometimes you get, into kind of a rabbit hole on things that you would like to be doing. And that's great. That's the ultimate goal. But your core of what you should be doing needs to be the things that you have to do. Now, the I is, do I have to do this? And a lot of agents have a really hard time of letting go of things. Okay. So really taking the time and thinking about, do I seriously have to open up this software and upload these documents? Or can I be the one that just, at the end verifies that I have a contract audit and I just verify everything was done at the end? So really taking a look at, if you are a producer or a broker or somebody that, needs to be focusing on what I call the dollar productive activities. Is this a dollar productive activity? You could argue that it is, because it has to be done. So it is a must. But do you have to do it?
Delegation.
And if you do, for whatever reason, then go ahead and check it off. I don't think that you do need to be doing this. And then this note portion is for you to kind of give yourself, what does this need to look like? This needs to happen as soon as possible once you go under contract. What link does that person need to go onto? So part of this, if you have decided that this is a must or even a want, wants are fine too, they can be tasked out to other people. If it is something that you're going to be doing and somebody else is going to be doing it, if you give them a simple to-do that just says, upload the documents into the brokerage compliance website, but you don't give them any specific details or anything else, after they've done it probably 20 times, that's fine. But I promise you're going to be holding their hands for the first 20 times until they just have muscle memory to do it. I'm a firm believer that the better way, not only that, but that admin could switch out in a couple of years and you'd be starting over from scratch. And that's going to pull you back from those dollar productive activities that you need to be focused on. So the better option is to start with the planning and think about, okay, if I wasn't here today and I'm in Bali sitting on the beach, what do I have to give somebody so that they could do this the right way the first time? And that's probably, creating an activity that happens at the right time. This is probably happening just as soon as you go under contract. So probably 0 days after acceptance. You're going to assign it to a role, either an admin, a transaction coordinator, an assistant, whoever that is. You're going to decide who's going to be doing it. And then you're going to decide how they're going to be doing it. Okay. So let's take a look at how this looks inside of Realvolve. So I'm inside of Realvolve in our demo account under workflows. I have buyer contract to close. We typically break down our contract to close into buy side and sell side contract to close. If you are dual agency and you are doing, one dual ended thing a year, I mean, I would make the argument I would still build it out. It wouldn't be my top priority if I was brand new. You need to have buy side and sell side contract to close first. But if you are doing dual agency, it would be my suggestion that you have a buy and sell side combined contract to close. I would also make the argument that if you're doing new construction, either as a listing agent or a lot of, not spec houses that are already built, because those function a lot like buyer contract to close. But if you're doing build out things, a lot of times those processes can be a little bit different enough where you may need a construction contract to close. And so really the difference in where you're deciding how you're going to structure your contract to close processes is, does it differ enough? Okay. So let's take why we have buy and sell side differently. When we go under contract, we've automated this process enough to where we're going to send out an email to the buyer. Okay. So this activity knows that it should be emailing the buyer. So there's enough intelligence here that this activity would be null and void under the contract for a seller. And so we want to make things as automated, as simple as possible. And so if you start to see those kind of things and enough things are different, then you definitely need different processes for that. So specifically going back to what we were talking about and uploading your documents to Realvolve or wherever, okay, this task right here, no different than this, right? Update your CRM, brokerage, website. You want to get your documents wherever they're going to live. And so inside, in this scenario, by default, we've said, let's get those documents to live inside of Realvolve. So we've titled it, Upload Your Documents to Realvolve. We've assigned it to the buyer transaction coordinator, and we've done that 0 days after acceptance. We have also put a checklist in here. So if you want to tell the person that should be responsible for reviewing these documents or getting them wherever they need to go, then this can be as specific as you want. It could say purchase and sale agreement, financing exhibit, HOA, lead-based paint if built before this. You could break this down so that person has whatever they need. This description also can serve as a place to give additional details. I mean, you can come in here and type as much as you want. And so what this is when this activity is created, if they need to open up this activity and get some more context on what they need to be doing, and it's not specifically in a checklist format, this is just giving them additional context. Whereas this checklist is saying, for you to actually complete this task, you need to come in here and check off that you did every single one of these things. Anything on that, Mark?
No, great job. The thing that is available whenever you're in your notes section, you can do similar types of things, but the description is really the better place for it. I'm hearing an echo.
Because the notes, when you complete this task, or when you are going to go file themselves under radar, correct?
Correct.
So let's talk about the difference here. If I add something into notes, go back and look at an activity. If I have an activity that is to be done, oh, I thought I just exited out of here. Hold on, guys. Sorry. All right. If I click on this activity, my description's here. And in this case, I'm changing a little bit, going on a lead thing, but you can see how this description is used, okay? If the lead answers, introduce yourself. Here's even a script. And so anything in the description is going to be really good, so that if that person, agent, admin, whatever else, he needs additional context, they can add it there. Now, if you add it into the notes section, that note is actually going to file itself in Radar when that activity is completed and kind of come and live here in the form of a note. And so the admin or the person could still access it, but it's actually going to be in notes and correspondent. It's not going to live inside this pencil here. It's going to file itself upon completion. So I would encourage you to use the description to give additional context. You can also do things like the checklist. So again, I'll go back to SkySlip. There's one of 10 places that you probably have for brokerage compliance. But you could say, go here, go to this specific link and do this. Okay. So the goal being, be very specific, assign it to who needs to be doing it, do it at the right time, and give them either the description or a specific checklist that they need to be doing that. You also have the ability to sync activities with Google. If you have this synced with Google, then your schedule comes into play. Okay. So in Google, if acceptance time had, I guess in some rare instances it does. If you say, I want to sync this with Google, and you do 0 days after acceptance, you can go a step further and say, where do I want this to live in my calendar or in Google? I can say all day and it's going to file itself at the top. I can say acceptance time and I can get it to file itself at a very specific place. So I do have those additional things. By default, it's just going to be none and to be 0 days after acceptance. I've said this 37 times and I'll probably say it 137 more. One of the most important things that you can have in any transaction process is enter your dates and enter your people. If you're doing nothing else, and if you go back over to your transaction, track important dates and important people. I know just by instinct, I have this conversation a lot. People naturally just want to come into their transaction, and admin especially. Once you've created your transaction, they say, oh, well, what do I do? Your first step for your admin and in your higher global processes should be start your workflow. And your workflow should be asking you for the things that you need to be doing. An admin left to their own devices will create the transaction, click on this transaction tab, and they'll try to fill out what they think they want to fill out here. Inevitably, probably missing things certain times, because what is shown here under important dates is only what you have set in your settings under set default fields. So if I come into set default fields, I have property and I have transaction. What this is saying is anything that I have selected here will show up as a field where we were just looking. We'll go back there in a minute, every single time. Now, if I create in my transaction process activities that says, who are the people, what are the dates, I can have 0 things filled out by default in my important dates or my field here in transactions. Under important dates will still feed itself. It will still fill itself out. Okay. So let me explain that again. If I went into my settings and I have deselected everything, meaning that when I create a new transaction, none of these blank fields are here, but I have correctly set up my who are my people, what are my dates with merge fields, meaning when in my checklist, I've said bracket, and then give me a date. This means it's a placeholder. Acceptance date ultimately will come and live here, but I'm not adding it here. I'm adding it in a checklist. And the difference is I'm telling a transaction coordinator at 0 days after acceptance, you should know this information. Not only should you know this information, this is the order in which my contract gives me that information. So if you're really going into seconds and minutes, which, that's how you lose your day, and you want to talk about admin efficiency and maximizing somebody's productivity, this is how you do it. Because the other thing that they're doing, if you've went into your settings and you filled these things out, your admin, without a well-structured contract to close process and workflow, they're looking at a contract and they're looking at this and they're going, well, what do I do? And so they're picking out dates and they're like, well, I don't see that. So they're coming in here, or at this point, they're probably calling you because they've never seen this added date field. And they're trying to do whatever. Here's another thing that I would implore you to use the contract or the checklist for. If you allow your admins to come in here and fill this out, in my contract to close workflow, as you can see, I've triggered the majority of my tasks off of acceptance date. Okay. We have hundreds of dates. Let me just give you an example. Contract date versus acceptance date versus ratification date. In different states, in different countries, those mean different things. And so let's say your admin doesn't have a workflow and they come in and they're like, oh yeah, well, I thought the acceptance date was the contract date. And you have 10 tasks that are triggering 0 days after acceptance date. Those tasks are never going to trigger correctly because the system was never given acceptance date. It needs acceptance date, okay? So the additional purpose of this, not only making sure for efficiency, time management, whatever, we are saying our activities trigger and need at this given time to know this information. It also helps them say, you know, I didn't see an appraisal contingency. Do we have one? And so it's giving them an additional thing where if they were just looking at it and they didn't have the right financing exhibit or whatever, they may just overlook it and go on. Whereas if they have this merge field that's specifically 0 days after acceptance, asking them, when is the appraisal contingency date ending? And they don't have what they need, they can't mark it off, or they have to double click it to say it's not applicable, which that very shows you from a compliance standpoint that you have an issue anyway.
It's all about process. Making sure that your processes are laid out.
Yeah. So let's go back and look at that. Track important dates. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, you must do that. Must you do that? No, I don't think you need to be doing that. Let's talk about putting things on the date in the these aren't even important date. We'll just say calendar. Okay. Your important dates calendarized. Just because you come in and put a date in here doesn't mean that it's going to file itself over to your calendar. And it doesn't mean that if you have Google Sync enabled, that it's going to go over to Google Sync. As we saw inside of this activity, the way it's set up, it is, you have the option as to whether you want to sync this to Google. So let's go down here and take a look at how we handle some of our, sorry guys, how we handle some of our appointments. Let's take this home inspection appointment. For anything that I want on the calendar, I have put it on the buyer agent's calendar. The distinction there is I am saying whose calendar it's going on. Unless the buyer's agent or the transaction coordinator is licensed and you really have offboarded your processes, and that may be something you're doing, but probably not. The agent, probably at a minimum wants to see when those dates are on their calendar. And so the way we've set that up, we've used a merge field. It's transaction street address. I'm actually a fan of putting the address behind the title. And the reason for that is when you come over to your calendar, you see how it says post to Instagram, things like that. If you have put your address first, this is going to say the address. That may be your preference. It's not my preference. I want to see what it is, and then I want to click on it to see what it is. So you have some ability to kind of structure that way as well. The assigned to is whose calendar it is going to be on. In this case, it's the buyer's agent. My appointment type, or my type, is appointment, and that just shows me that the reason that this is here is to calendarize this. The group is home inspection, and we'll go over groups in a minute. The with is none, and what with is I always think about this of who am I communicating with. I'm really not doing any talking here. I'm not sending an email. I'm not doing a text message. I'm not communicating or interacting with someone else. In that case, I don't need it to be this. I just need it to be on the buyer agent's calendar. My schedule is 0 days, my computed date after home inspection date, and we went down and said home inspection time. I've also clicked that I want this synced with Google. So what I've done is I've created a calendar activity for this specific home inspection at this time in this date, which means that if the system does not have the home inspection time and the date, it has nothing to calendarize. Okay, so it's not just going to make up some date and time. It's going to wait for that information to be fed and looping back to how do we get that information, okay? Some people will want to add this here, right? What are the dates? What are the people? I do not put my home inspection time and dates in my initial ask, okay? Now I have my home inspection contingency date 0 days after acceptance, but if you put when is my, and I could do this, right? I could put home inspection date and time. If I add it here, but you notoriously are taking a day, 2 days to get inspections scheduled, you've ultimately set yourself up for failure because you now have your admin having a task sit on their to-do for a day or two when you knew that they would never be able to finish this as soon as possible. And so this shouldn't live here if we can't complete it right away, because this all goes back to compliance too, which is something else that we're going to go here about. Part of what's going to give you the ability to offboard or to give the confidence to somebody else to complete those, and you be able to rest assured that those things are getting done, is to know that things are getting done. So one, you have an activity that you can come in and check things that are assigned to your admin to see if they're actually being completed off. So if I went under contract today and this activity, my acceptance date is today, this activity to audit the contract for signature and dates is going to be due today. Well, if I put the home inspection date in this checklist, it's my fault that this activity is sitting here for 2 days because I knew that my home inspection would not be handled that day. But if I took time and I said each one of these merge fields should be on that contract, and you, transaction coordinator, should have this done within 24 hours, then I can come up here and have a little bit more control, because I'm going to say, I set this for priority. And in my mind, if I set a color to red, then that tells my transaction coordinator, you have 24 hours, 24 business hours, however you set it up to get this done. If you didn't get it done, then you're out of compliance, and now we have an issue. You're not doing your job. And so the question is if you're, and going back to the calendars, if you're creating calendar things, how is that information getting in the system? And if you're relying on your admin to know, oh yeah, we have a home inspection time and date, and to go into that transaction and just add it, it's probably going to get missed. So right here, we say 1 day after acceptance, we have a task to order the home inspection. Again, assigning that to the buyer's transaction coordinator. You could flip that and say the agent's going to do it. But again, this is part of your planning process. Who is going to be doing it? And that's up to you. In this case, we've said, all right, give the buyer transaction coordinator the task of doing it. We're going to say 1 day after acceptance. This may be 0 days after acceptance, but the reason that we have this spaced out is because we know that this process could take a day or two, because we have a lot of moving parts here. So ultimately, in our checklist, we have a merge field for home inspector date, and home inspector time. If the transaction coordinator gets this task and this information is already in the system, because it's a merge field, it would already pull itself into this activity, and they could easily see inside of this checklist that this is already done. And they could say, okay, here's this, here's this, here's this. Now, once they've done that, they have an action item. In this case, they have a send a confirmation email to the seller's agent. So I can look here. If I click on this preview, it'll throw open my email. Inspection reminder for 123 Main Street. Please confirm utilities and access. Okay. So we've said, hey, seller agent, our inspection for 123 Main Street is scheduled at this time at this place. And going back to efficiency and process, every time I put something into template, I'm always asking myself, where is this information coming from? Because if you go to send this email and the system does not have this information living somewhere, it will pull blank. And a lot of times your admins may overlook that. So when I'm setting things up, I'm always asking where this information lives. And so when I go back here, I'm like, I've got the seller agent's first name. Well, if I go to my with field, I'm sending it to the seller agent. So the system's going to know who the seller agent is. If I look at the street address, when I create a transaction, one of the first things that I'm going to do is put in the address. So that should be there, should be pulling that in. home inspection date, home inspection time. Those are being pulled from my checklist. Home inspection date, home inspection time. In order for this action item to be seen, all 3 of my checklist items have to be completed. The reason I know that is because this button down here, action for an incomplete checklist, is not checked. This says, with this checked, you don't have to complete this checklist item to have access to this action. So let's think about that. Can I send an email over to the seller agent saying, hey, we've confirmed the time and date for our inspection at this time and this date with this person before I've completed these 3 items? I cannot. So by deselecting this, I have said, do not show this action item until all 3 of these things have been completed. I can take that a step further and have multiple action items. So maybe in this case, I wanted to, send an email over, and instead of having a confirmation of inspection, my process was going to be send an email over to the buyer with a list of my preferred home inspectors. Okay, now assume this says send the list of my preferred home inspectors template. So let's talk about how this works on the flip side. In this situation, it makes sense for me to send a list of my preferred home inspectors prior to me knowing who the home inspector is, what is the date and the time of the home inspection, because I'm trying to facilitate the home inspection. Okay, if I already know who the home inspector is, it makes no sense for me to send that information over to the buyer. Now, what this says is, if I do not know this information, my checklist is not complete, show me this action. And in this case, this action is sending this email over to the buyer. Well, if you send the email over to the buyer, what happens next? That's what this reschedule is in so many days, okay? So if you leave it at 0 days, which it's going to be as default, it means that as soon as I send this email out, let this activity live here and don't let it go away. Now, if it's something where you know that this review of the list that you're sending them or whatever this action item is going to take some time. Let's say you're going to give that buyer 2 days to review this list of home inspectors, probably a little long. What this says is, give me the action item to send them the list of my preferred home inspectors before I have scheduled this. But if I send this email out to them, make this task go away and come back in 2 days. So get it off of my to-do and make it reappear in 2 days. And what that's going to look like is, again, your admin or your transaction coordinator saying, hey, coordinate the home inspection. And they go right back to the situation with a checklist that says, who's the home inspector? What is the date and the time of the home inspection? And they can clearly see, oh, I sent that email to that buyer a couple of days ago. I need to follow back up on this and make sure that it's done.
I hope everybody's understanding the power of that. Because whenever you are setting up the system, the process, if things come before other things, make sure they're in place. But in this particular case, we don't know something. There's a piece of information that's missing. We don't know who they want to use as the home inspector. So because we don't know, there's no way of completing that checklist. And because we can't complete that checklist, we need some kind of action that gets sent out. By going into actions and setting that checkbox to say, for an incomplete checklist, do this process, I can send that out. I can wait my 2 days. Hopefully by those 2 days, it gives the person that I sent it to will receive that email. They'll review that email and they'll pick somebody from that list and they'll respond back. Once they've responded back, up to 2 days later, and 1 or 2 days, whatever you want to give them, this activity is going to come back up. You cannot get past this activity until those check boxes are checked. So you've got confirmation. If the fields aren't filled in, you can fill them in. That means now you've been able to streamline your process and only ask the pertinent questions at the pertinent time. And whenever they do reply back, now you have the ability to fill in that information. And the other action, she was showing an action where you don't know the home inspector yet. You'd probably have two actions there, one for if you don't know the inspector, one if you do know the inspector, in which case, once you've checked off those three check boxes, then the action for confirmation then would go out. And that's the one that is unchecked on that option for incomplete checklist. So, and which is the default. Anytime you start a new action, it does that by default anyway. But with the checked, it just gives you that added capability of delaying an action, delaying the completion of an activity until you get all the information. It's just very, very powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, right? So I want to, and don't let this scare you, because the one of the benefits of Realvolve is the robustness of the system. Okay, so what I was talking about is very, 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 very detailed, and that's how I would prefer to work, especially if I'm tasking things out to an admin. So in that situation, I can have incomplete checklist items that say, hey, give them a copy of the preferred lenders, verify that it got scheduled, and then confirm that with everybody, right? So I've essentially, taken care of 3 steps inside of one activity. Now, you don't have to do that. You can make this very, very simple, okay? Just, it could be a very simple to do that just says, verify the home inspection got scheduled, okay? Assign it to who you're going to assign it to. By default, it's going to be the account owner. You could also say, give it to this admin if they have a seat in your Realvolve account, or you could assign it to a role. We typically do roles because roles change. Maybe Lisa's, going to get promoted in a couple of years, or, whatever. She's not always going to be the transaction coordinator. So I don't want to have to come back in here and change these in the future. So I'm going to do my title, I'm going to do my assigned to, and I'm going to do my width. And so when do I need to pay attention to this? And so you're going to think about ideal of scheduling. So typically acceptance date, you're going to trigger off of that. You could also trigger so many days before the end of your home inspection contingency period. So maybe it's 4 days before my home inspection contingency date expires. Okay, so you have some ability to kind of make smart things. So if you're doing nothing else, if the robustness of the system is overwhelming, go back to your planning and saying, is this getting done? And it could be as simple to do with a title, and assigned to, and a schedule, and call it that. Now, if you say, hey, these are the things that I want to do, but the robustness of the system, we're not sure, whatever else, we have a whole team of people that eat, breathe, and sleep Realvolve that can do any of this stuff for you, work with you one-on-one to do that. So don't let the complexity of the system scare you. Another thing that I wanted to pay attention to, and I'll go back to this example of getting this home inspection scheduled. It would not be appropriate for me to, especially in this day and age, what if they waive their home inspection, or the house is sold as is, and for a fact they're not going to be doing a home inspection. We also have the ability to group that information so that we don't see certain things that don't apply. And what that looks like on the front end when you go to start a workflow is this. These groups are here. Let's go to home inspection. If I deselect this group, do you see how it deselected this task to order the home inspection? And it did that because it was tied to this group here. I said, this activity only pertains to when we have a home inspection. So if we don't have a home inspection, let's deselect it and get rid of any of those activities that only pertain to home inspection. I'm not going to send out a reminder of a home inspection. I'm not going to confirm the inspection results. I'm not going to calendarize my appointment for my home inspection. I'm not going to make sure that any repair requests were done. All of these things have to do with a group. In this case, a home inspection. So if I'm not doing a home inspection, by grouping my activities, I can say this only pertains at this certain time, and I can easily deselect it. So as you can see, these are some of the things that by default, if in our workflows that we do, and this may look different from you, but you're thinking about your groups in terms of things that sometimes happen and sometimes don't happen. I'm not always doing an appraisal. I don't always have an HOA. It's not always a condo. It's not a home warranty. There's not always a loan, pool inspection, termite inspection, radon, things like that, referral. So these are the things that you can easily say, this doesn't apply to this situation, and get rid of those tasks.
The real advantage here, if you think about it, is if you did not have that grouping capability, you would have to have separate workflows. You'd have to have different things. So you're starting different workflows each time in that case. By having the group option there, it gives you that flexibility to say, well, whenever I don't have something, there's a series of activities that I don't need to worry about. So let's just remove them off and not worry about them. Lenders, is it a cash deal? Is it, do they need a lender? There's lots of things that are optional. And, the HOA is one, all these different things. So just by allowing you to group certain things, it now allows you to identify those things that I only use once in a while and can move on.
Yep, exactly. And the last thing that I want to show you in terms of capability behind activities is the reporting function. And so what I have done over here on the right is I have set report to yes. And so inside of this transaction, I have a tab called buyer reports. Things can get added to this tab two different ways. I can come in here and manually hit this plus. I can do my type. I can type in a message to the buyer. Something happened here. I can put internal notes here. I can say when this happened. I can set a time. And when I do that, it files itself here, okay? Taking that a step further, making that one step smarter, what I did was I said, go ahead and file this title, whatever this title is right here. Upon completion of this activity, file it in this report for me automatically because I completed it. And so as you can see here, I set this task, order home inspection, to report yes. So when I complete this task, I'm now a home inspector, guys. And I'm going to do this home inspection tomorrow, 7 a.m. When I do this and I hit save and close, then now what I did was I said, hey, you need to take this activity that I've completed and file it over here for me automatically. So I didn't have to come in here and hit this plus sign. And so the benefit behind this, I typically like to use these reports in ways to keep the client up to date. So think about the implications if you have a listing. Hey, seller, here's the things I did for you. Hey, you're under contract. Here's a list of the things that happened. And so then what you can do is weekly, every 2 weeks, whenever you want, anything that you have marked to report yes is going to take the title of that activity, file it away. And so you either have a running report of things that are happening in addition to your radar tab, or you now have access to use certain merge fields. In this case, I'm going to do buyer, what is it, report, if I could spell. So buyer report, as you can see, we have a few, okay? So pay attention to the difference of these. Buyer report says go in there and take a full list of anything that's in that page. That may be what you want to do. But probably if I'm using it in the situation where I'm saying, hey, seller, here's a list of the things I did for you this week, I don't want to send them a list of the things that I already sent them last week. And so buyer report non-sent only says, go and look at that page, but take into account if I've already sent this email and take out the things that I've already told the person I'm sending it to. So more than likely, I'm probably using non-sent only. You also have the option to say sent only. So maybe you only want to send the things that you've previously sent before. In this case, I want to say, go and pull the things that I have never sent before. So I'm saying, hey, buyer, here's what's been going on since you were under contract. And again, as long as I set up my activities to report these things that happened are automatically being filed anyway. I didn't really have to do anything. And I can set this template up so it says, hey, buyer, here's a list of the things I did for you this week or that have been going on since you're under contract. And then as you can see here, this merge field, buyer report, non-sent only, went and looked at that page and pulled in a list of the date, the type, and what was done. In this case, 102 shell, order home inspection. It pulled verbatim that I completed this activity because I toggled this report to yes. Any questions on that?
Think about the power of that, of just keeping your clients up to date. Now, we do this both on buyer side and on the listing for the seller side. So there's seller reports, there's buyer reports, and then you can even do the similar type of thing for the contacts for doing showings and stuff as well. But what this does now is this just gives you that added reporting capability to your clients to say, hey, this is what I've done for you. And you don't, especially on the listing side. I mean, if you're doing something on the listing side and things aren't going well as far as finding something, at least they know that you've been working and trying to market that property and seeing all the different tasks that you have done. A lot of times I've seen where agents, they don't report and things don't seem to be happening. And then at the end of this, it's like, well, you didn't do anything for me, so why should I, renew my contract? And it's my listing contract. And it's not that you didn't do it, it's just you didn't tell them that you did it.
Right. And let's just say you hadn't been sending that, okay, well, let me send an email over to you with an itemized list of the date and the time that I did absolutely everything for you. So that report feature, it's very, it's advanced. It's something that, I really just want to show you the power of the ability to think through all scenarios. Okay. If this hasn't happened, I need to do this. If this hasn't happened, I need to do that. And if these activities are set up properly, they handle these varieties of complex situations very, very accurately as long as these activities are set up. Step number one is just to complete something like this where you're making the distinction on or making the commitment to do these things. Okay. So if you're just kind of flying by the seat of the pants, there may be 10 things that you're really doing, but just taking the time to fill something out like this where you're really saying, one, do I have to do this? And do I want to be doing this? Because some of those things just make you look like a rock star to other agents, to your brokerage, to your clients. They help with future business. They just, they make you look and they make you stand out. And so I would first say, make this list of things that you want to be doing. Make notes on when you should be doing them, those things that you need to do. Inside of Realvolve, make sure that there's an activity for each one of those things with a minimum of a title, who's responsible for doing it, when they're doing it, any information they need to doing it using the description and the checklist, and make sure that's done for every single one of these. If you want to make sure that your account's fully robust, filled out, what about this, the automation behind it, we have professionals that work with you to do that. So don't let the complexity of the system scare you because we're here to help you with that. I want to leave a little bit time for Q&A. Mark, do we have any questions so far?
We had one that, just a quick question. If the buyer waives the home inspection, would I want the home inspection waiver in the file? And, my recommendation would be yes, put that as a checklist item, possibly even.
Yeah, and one goes back to brokerage compliance. Does your broker require it? And if they do, absolutely. And if not, you're just making that distinction if you're going to keep that for your own personal records. And if you are, it should definitely probably be inside of that. And again, going back to that situation, if you are asking for a waiver, and maybe, you know, in this situation, you don't have, you know, you would have an additional thing that says upload a copy of the inspection waiver if they're not doing an inspection or something like that. That could even be part of your you're verifying your all documents are received, but really you want to think about when would be the most appropriate time to see that document or have it requested.
And if it's a checklist item, then you can also use the circle slash. You can slash it out saying, no, I don't need that. I mean, I don't need the waiver because I'm actually doing the inspection, and identify it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
That's all that we have in the chat area. Anybody else have additional question? You can just unmute if you've got any additional questions. Was this helpful? Makes sense?
Was good. Hey, Kendra, that was mine because I want that in mine, just FYI.
Okay. I'll make a note on that.
Okay, thanks.
So really, and just kind of recapping everything that we talked about, your higher level processes, if you go under contract, your steps should be create the transaction. So if you have a listing and it's your listing, by you changing it from active to pending, it will create a transaction in Realvolve. If it is your buyer, you're going to click on this plus sign and click create a transaction. That's always going to be your step. You're always going to create a transaction. Then your first step should be put in the address. Or your second step, put in the address. You can do that by clicking on this white bar, these 3 dots. I'm going to always click on the 3 dots because I want the breakdown of street number, street name, zip, things like that. If I just put it in the white bar, the system doesn't know which is which, and it will also populate this map. My third step is always going to be start a workflow. I am never going to instruct my transaction coordinator to come over here and start filling things out. I want my workflow to ask for that information. So my 3 steps: start the transaction, input your address, start a workflow. If you do not have or if you do not have contract to close processes, I'm telling you, you probably need a buyer and a seller contract to close process. If you do not have one at all, 1, we sell them. 2, you can build your own out. If you're going to build your own out, start with this worksheet or something like this. Even if you already have a workflow, sometimes my workflow process is like 70 steps long, okay? Because I'm making sure nothing gets missed. And I also do this every single day. But if I just want to kind of just have a higher level view, this is what I'm doing. I want to be doing this. I want to be doing this. And then I'm thinking about, well, how am I doing that? What inside of Realvolve is allowing me to do that? And just kind of making sure that each one of my wants and my musts are put into activities. And then the I musts should be really limited. Because why do you have to do this? What can you do to your activities to empower somebody else to do it, give you the oversight so that all you're doing is logging in and verifying that somebody else did it, and that they did it correctly and they had the tools and the resources to do it. And I would suggest that you do that even if you're a solo agent right now, because I promise you that if you're a successful agent and you're doing it on your own, you're either a magician or you're exhausted. So your goal should be to have additional resources as you grow, whether it's a transaction coordinator, an assistant, whatever it is. So build those processes let those people step into place. Don't hire that admin or that transaction coordinator and just say, hey, run with me. You'll figure it out, because you're not setting them up for success. This is a much better, more structured way to allow the process to be put into place and not the person. Do not train a person. Build a system that the person can work in, and that's how you're going to set yourself up for success.
I always use the example of McDonald's. While I'm not a huge fan of the actual McDonald's hamburger. Every McDonald's hamburger is done the exact same way. And it's not because somebody necessarily trained them on they were trained on a specific process, and that process is what makes things flow so much faster, so much better. They don't have to think about it. This is how it's done. And by setting up your workflows to do that in your own business, that makes it scalable, it makes it duplicatable, and it opens up your time so that whenever you go home at the end of the day, you can be with your family and not worry about things being left undone.
Yeah, exactly. And in your workflow, your checklist may start off, very, very simplistic, and kind of how I grew in the system. And, when I was managing a brokerage and all of the other stuff, some of this is trial by error. You're going to build it out, you're going to start to use it, and then you're going to refine it. And that refinement process is crucial. And sometimes what that looks like is, we would have things that would happen and a ball would get dropped. And I'm always asking myself, well, why didn't that person do it accurately? And it's, they should have known. If they should have known is the answer, then you're setting them up for failure. They should have the tools and the resources. So I'm asking myself, as that person's manager, did I give them the tools and the resources they needed at the correct time? And all of that's done through your workflow before they ever get involved. And it starts with just simple planning like this.
I like to use the analogy of design, build, run, repeat. You design it, you build it, you run it, and then repeat just goes back and says, did I miss anything? Is there anything that I could have done better? Was there something that went wrong in that process that could have been averted had I done something different? And then go back and design, build, run, repeat. Design, build.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think about templates, or not, in emails. Think about the one template you've probably written 400 times. Why is that template not somewhere and in a way where you're clicking two buttons and it's writing itself for you, and the system already knows who to send it to and when you should be sending it? I mean, that a lot of people are like, well, I don't have the time to do this. Well, how do you have the time to write the same email 450 times? Like, that's what's exhausting to me. So, the things, the time, the planning, the execution, whether you're doing it, we're doing it with you. And, reach out to sales at Realvolve if you need help building some of this stuff out. We have 3-month, 6-month, and go at your own pace programs to help you get these things set up. Again, we do these office hours every Wednesday at 11 Eastern. And coming up, we're going to talk about setting yourself up for success. So some of those best practices you should be doing, celebrating holidays, and then we'll have another Q&A session, getting some commonly questions that have come up in the last month answered. Pay attention to your black bar at the bottom. Our chat, or contact us is our chat when that's live. If you need to reach out to somebody in real time, your help button is a search article. Submit a support ticket if you see something that's just not quite working in your system. I hope that you took, even if you already have your workflows built out, I hope you took a copy of that planning. If you did not, also take a copy of it, and even go back and just say, is everything that I want to be doing in my workflows? How can I improve? Even if you've had the same workflows for 5 years, there's tweaking, there's refining, there's things that you can be doing to continuously better yourself. So I would just, take a look at systems, even if they're already in place. Any last minute questions?
They're saying, thank you all. Thank you. Very informative. Great job, Kendra. Appreciate you. Every day I get to experience your training. You do great.
Oh, awesome. And these are going to be on again, our Facebook page, Realvolve's Facebook page. And so I talk fast, I talk a lot. If you need to revisit this or any of our other topics, take a look at those video recordings.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, guys.